Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. With your hosts, Drew and Daniela. Take our hands and let's walk this journey together. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. And today we're going to talk about being burnt out and what that feels like long term. Like pretty much what I feel like right now. This would inspire this episode. And I'm starting to realize how it's been affecting me for the past couple of weeks. So I'd like to talk about it today because why not? We're real here on this episode. So what is it? What is burnout? What does it look like? And how can it affect you? I mean, maybe you're lacking in motivation. Maybe you're feeling tired, fatigued. Maybe you have brain fog. Realize that maybe you can't deliver on things that you would normally. Maybe you can't really deliver on things that you normally would because, you know, your mind is not running optimally. Or you're feeling stressed, maybe punchy and irritable. All these signs lead to one thing. Root cause is being burnt out. So how do we fix that? Daniela, have you ever been burnt out?
I've definitely been burnt out before, yeah.
Well, say it isn't so. Care to elaborate a little?
Yeah, I've experienced, I guess, burnout at different points in my life. I would say that the one that is not, I don't know if most recent is the right term, but the one that I've experienced in like the most of in the last couple of years is being burnt out from work. Sometimes, you know, at the end of the day, I'm really tired, or at the end of the week, work has taken an emotional toll on me. I would say that that's like reoccurring, or like the one that's most likely to happen in the last couple years. Because I've really settled into my profession and what I do. Prior to that, you know, there were times where I felt burnt out from school. I would say even playing soccer, there were times where I was burnt out from maybe playing too much or being in an environment that wasn't good for me. So I would say that there's different times where I felt burnt out.
Well, it's a lot of times. I was only maybe one time, but you got a handful of times there. So what do you think would be a good way to combat that? How did you come back from that? What did you do to kind of become, like, I guess, more whole and feel less burnt?
Well, part of it is starting to recognize, like, gaining self-awareness into when I was feeling burnt out. You asked the question earlier, what does that look like? I think that's a really important question to ask ourselves just on a daily basis. How do we feel as far as my symptoms of burnout? Am I a little bit tired today? Am I a little bit like low on energy today? And what does that really mean? Is it because you had a really intense workout the day before, or is it because, you know, you're in your head about things and you're struggling to manage? So part of it was starting to recognize the symptoms of burnout before I got to a place of burning out. I would say that's one of the like key components, is addressing what it looks like. And you also mentioned about like fatigued and brain fog and motivation and low on energy and maybe like low mood. Those things, just starting to really think about what you're experiencing, or what I was experiencing, or what I do experience in moments just in my life. Checking in with myself. I would say that that's the first step. and then doing what helps me feel good, what helps me recover. Kind of like how you charge your phone back to 100%, kind of discovering what things I can do to recharge my battery. Maybe the goal is not to get it back to 100%, but just a little bit at a time, and see how I can do that. Yeah, that's like the starting, what comes to mind.
Well, do you think maybe like setting boundaries with your work, your activities, all those things were something that you implemented?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I remember when I first started uh, working with clients, seeing clients, I would make myself easily accessible in case anybody ever needed anything. And then when I came to find, you know, patients were messaging me at like 11 o'clock on Sundays. And I was finding myself like going back and forth, whether it was an emergency or not. It felt like an emergency to them. And then it was getting to a point where it was overwhelming. So I started to set a boundary. And when I started to work with people, I would say, this is my number. You can reach out to me. If it's an emergency, reach out to me twice. If I don't answer, you can either call a crisis number or police or the police. I get back to you in like as timely manner as like fast as I can. But if it's out of office hours or if it's on a weekend, my response time is going to be pretty limited. And most people are pretty okay with that. It also models setting boundaries for them. I would say that that's like the one of the things that comes to mind when I set boundaries. So yeah, I think it's definitely important to set boundaries. So many of us give so much to our job, whether it's something that we love or whether it's something that we don't love. So many of us find ourselves working past the time or stressing out about customer or a task or an assignment. So setting boundaries is definitely important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think having that in place will keep you honest with yourself and your limits on what you can and cannot do. I think a lot of us sometimes try to take on way more than we can, whether it's work or play, or sometimes we try to play as hard as we work, and it's like you're burning your candle at both ends. So you're stressed at work, and then you go and play and you go and do things that are fun, but you stretch your abilities to stay awake or even to perform the next day because you were out so late trying to make up for all the time you spent working. So I think that necessarily you need to be real with yourself as far as your limitations on work. And you also have to set limitations on how late you should be out playing. Sometimes you overplay and then you underwork. So it's kind of a balance of all of the both, as well as taking on other responsibilities. I think that, people want to overextend themselves to help other people, and that's fine to help other people, but you also have to be fair to yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be useful to anyone or anything. And I think that's really important in the boundary setting area. If I'm not going off on a tangent too much.
No,
Okay.
I was following. I was actually thinking as you were talking, you talked about you try to do things for other people and, pushing yourself beyond the limits. I was thinking about the burnout doesn't necessarily only apply to like work, but it also applies to friendships and even to things in like our personal lives. Because as you were talking, I was literally thinking, well, sometimes you feel burnt out even from your friends, whether it's your friends not being mindful of what you're going through, or whether they just have a lot going on themselves and they look to you for guidance or for support. I know that's definitely happened to me too, where some of the things that my friends have experienced in my life, sometimes it's like, man, that was a lot. And just being mindful of those things and setting boundaries there. I think that's also important. That's what I thought about when you were talking.
Well, thank you. Thank you for underlining that.
You're welcome.
I mean, also, if you're in the groove and you're doing some work, sometimes we go too far. We never get up. We never acknowledge we should take a break or have a snack or drink some water. I ended up doing that today. I was so overwhelmed with what I was doing, and I wanted to get it done so bad that I disregarded my body saying, "Hey, you need a break. Hey, you need a walk. Hey, you should go get something to eat." And I just went straight through, a good 8 hours straight. And at the end, I didn't feel rewarded. I just felt like, oh, I'm glad it's done. But now it bled over into my ability to focus and function towards the activities I had to do after work. And it didn't feel good. It just left me kind of in this state of feeling, wow, like scratching my head. It just offsets everything. So you might think that putting in that extra time, and sometimes you do, I get it, but sometimes you hurt yourself in the long run. And you got to look back and say, did I do the best that I could have? If I would have given myself a little bit more time, maybe a little bit of a breather, 30 seconds, a minute, a couple of minutes to kind of just restructure. Because if you're not functioning, like if you're not firing off at your optimal in your brain, it's going to affect everything you do. And it's probably going to lead to poor choices too, right? You're not going to eat as good. You're not going to exercise. You're going to probably oversleep. It compounds. There's a lot of things that are involved with it. So I think it's very important that we're honest with ourselves and that we get what we need. Our body does need a lot of things, and we're very selfish with other things in our lives. Put some of the things that we truly need, like sleep, proper nutrition, and exercise, get neglected all the time, so we can do dumb shit.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah, because when you're hurting or your health isn't the best, and something happens, you're like, damn, I'd do anything to get back to where I would do anything now. And you're on this like path to get yourself right, but you're making up for all the time you neglected yourself, and it's easily avoidable. And we live in a society where that's okay, right? We live in a society where you burn yourself out and it's okay. You got the job done and you move on. And a lot of people follow that path, and they find out it's not a long sustainable one. It's not. Eventually you're going to have that moment where you're either going to walk away from what you're doing and hate it. You're going to hurt yourself, or you're going to hurt the people around you. And they're going to be like, "Oh, this guy's an asshole. This person's an asshole. They're not fun to be around when they're they're doing their best at whatever they do in their lives." So I think it's important to step back and reassess the situation. Try not to get to the point where you're burnt out, but just acknowledge that you're heading in that direction and then change course.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that that's the optimal way to do it. But also, some of us don't even know what it means to be burnt out until we're really burnt out. That's how we learn. I would say that if there are people who are at a point where they are feeling really burnt out and they feel like it's just too much, it's important to know that it is not too late to come back from it, because that's where I think we insert a concept like reframing, right? So a lot of us feel like when we burn out, we're like just in this loop of working really hard, burning out, taking a vacation, but then needing to come back and then work all over again because you need to compensate for or make up for the money that you spent on your vacation and so forth and so forth. So it's a cycle, right? And that goes with anything. Even when you take a break from like your friends or even a relationship or even your family, we are like in this cycle, and sometimes we feel like, man, like it just gets to a point where I'm too far gone. But instead of seeing it as a cycle, seeing it as peaks and valleys is the terms that we've used. There's going to be times where you are able to recognize that you're burnt out, and then there's going to be times where maybe you don't realize until you're at the very bottom. But that's okay, because we're human beings. We have limits, and it's okay that it's not okay, but it's okay to not be okay in that sense. It's not like there's something wrong with you because you've let yourself get burnt out. In some ways, that shows that, very driven very passionate because you're willing to go and sacrifice everything is a double-edged sword for sure. But it doesn't mean that all hope is lost for anybody who has experienced burnout or continuous burnout and just doesn't know how to come out of it and feels like maybe it's too late. I would say that both, whether you know how to recognize it or whether you realize when you're already super burnt out, you can still come out of it, just like you come out of your peaks and valleys. All it takes is maybe a little bit of push, maybe even some support of reaching out to somebody and say, hey, I'm really burnt out, whether it's a supervisor at work or just a friend that you know that you can rely on, etc., etc.
Yeah, I was gonna add that at the very end too.
But you didn't.
Nope. But I had you too. I knew you were gonna do it justice. Yeah.
Oh.
Don't be too proud to go ask for help. If things are overloading and they're to the point where things are starting to get real dark, reach out for help. Talk to somebody. Talk to friends. Look for support. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, you need to take care of yourself because it can get out of hand quickly. And there are some people that have. I heard, quote unquote, that the Apple factory where they assemble phones, they have netting outside the buildings around the windows because people like lose their shit and try to jump out windows.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you could put yourself. I mean, you can get yourself to go mad. I mean, there are people I've heard there are people that game extremely. They go online and they play for 10 hours, 11, 12-hour marathons. I think it was a big thing in Korea where they had these internet cafes where people just, this one guy I think died in the cafe. He was there for like 24 hours straight just gaming. People push themselves to limits. Your body is not meant to do that. I mean, there are some people that can push their body to limits, but they do it in a way where they're eating properly, they're pushing their body slowly, they go through extreme situations. But an average couch potato or person that's just, living life and trying to get some extra work done, please don't do that. Seek professional help. Seek out Daniela. We were going to give you her a number so you can call her even on the weekends and text her and bother her. And no, I'm kidding. But yes, we have a professional on here that's saying seek professional help. So that says something.
Well, I didn't necessarily say seek professional help. That's definitely an option, but seek some form of help.
Yes.
Just clarifying on that one. Okay. And then also to add to what you were saying, I think that we can push ourselves to our limit, but in the proper ways. If we push ourselves to a limit beyond what we're actually capable of, that's when things, go south. And that's when we get burnt out. But if we, kind of like when you train for a marathon, that's where the recognition comes in, recognizing and understanding your triggers and your symptoms of burnout. Kind of comes back to the same thing.
Well, I agree 100,000%. And that wraps up today's show. I appreciate everyone for listening, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace.